Hey guys, what's up? It's Samantha, and today I'm going to be memory keeping and talking about what I read the week of August 17th through the 23rd. I'm using this Scribble Prints Co. kit. I think it's called Boho Vibes or something like that. And then this really beautiful wiggle also from Scribble Prints Co. that is showing up as more silver on here, but it's actually a really light aqua blue color, and it just worked so beautifully with this kit. It just was very complimentary to the pinks, and it kind of is somewhere in between the darker green and the light kind of aqua seafoam blue in here. It worked. It's gorgeous. It doesn't really show up super well on camera. It just looks silver, but in person, it was absolutely stunning. So this week I read 4 books, and all of them were pretty solid books. They're all things that I would recommend. So that's refreshing. I feel like I've had pretty good weeks and like a run of good books for a while there. So the first book I read was a graphic novel, and I just picked this up because the coloring on this was absolutely insane, and it was a visual delight. I didn't care about the story as much, but the book was A Map to the Sun by Sloane. I think her last name is pronounced Leong. I'm not entirely sure, so I apologize if I just butchered that. But this is a story about a group of girls who create a girls' basketball team at their high school, and it's kind of just like friend drama, and you know, they're all kind of coming into their own and figuring out their identities, and it's a very diverse graphic novel, but I didn't really care about the story that much. I didn't realize it was about basketball. I probably would not have picked this up if I had known it was about basketball. I probably would have just flipped through, but I will say the coloring on it is just insane. It's this like bright neon fever dream of a book, and that part was absolutely gorgeous. I just didn't really care about the story very much because I'm not really a big sports fan, and I didn't realize it was a super sports heavy book. I don't know, like I literally just picked it up because the coloring was nuts. So then the second book that I read was probably my most anticipated sequel for this year, and that was The Faithless Hawk by Margaret Owen, which is the sequel to The Merciful Crow, which I talked about in one of my last few videos, and that was probably my favorite YA fantasy release in 2019. So I had this sequel hyped up a lot in my head, and I was very worried that going into this, there would be no way it could live up to the first book in the series for me. And I've gotten a lot pickier about my YA fantasy over the past few years, but I'm going to be screaming about this series for the rest of time. I'm going to be pushing this on my grandkids 50 years from now. I mean, I love this series so much. I found the sequel to be just as captivating and well written and as exciting as the first book. It delves way more into the world building and the history of this world and kind of more of the how and why the magic system works. It's a little more political. There is angst and drama. I don't want to get into like what the plot of this is because that spoils how the first book ends. I like literally can't even say anything about the synopsis without spoiling the first book. So there's a romance, and just everything is just perfect. And it ended perfectly, and it was very fulfilling, and this worked perfectly as a duology. Like, there is an end to this story. I think it would be cool to read more in this world, but this story is definitely very much 100% complete, and I appreciated that because I feel like so many duologies end up becoming like unnecessary trilogies. This is just perfect YA fantasy that I really think can be enjoyed by anyone who just likes good, like it's just good fantasy. Like yes, it's marketed as YA, but it's just a good fantasy story. Just like chef's kiss, perfection. Just, yes. Everything about this book series. Yes, I need you guys to read this. I feel like this is one of the most underhyped book series. I remember seeing the first one around, like people mentioning it a lot, and then it came out, and then no one really seemed to read or talk about it. And I didn't even see anything about like the second one on, BookTube or Bookstagram. I really didn't see any posts about it. And I'm like, did we all just forget about The Merciful Crow from last year? Because that was a really great book, and then everyone just forgot about it. But I will be that lone voice, like, in the crowd screaming about this duology because y'all need to read it. So then the next book I read was Vicious Spirits, which is by Kat Cho, which is the sequel to Wicked Fox, which I talked about in my previous Plan With Me. And this was also a delightful sequel. Basically, everything that I had to say about Wicked Fox applies here as well. It is highly entertaining. It is very angsty and melodramatic. I would recommend it to fans of K-dramas, or I always say like anime, even though anime isn't, I know it's not Korean, but that kind of over the top, like those reactions, that kind of thing is very present here. We actually are following, for the most part, two different characters who were side characters in the first book, and they have a very different dynamic than Myung and Jihoon did, and it's a lot of fun. You still do get periodic point of view chapters from Myung and Jihoon if you are still invested in them. Trust me, that is still, there's still their romance and all of that stuff going on, but we get more of the world, we get more of kind of the backstory, more of the mythology, more of all that kind of goodness, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then the last book that I read this week was The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, and this is a book that I can see having mass appeal specifically for teen boys or very like young adult men, like not teenagers, but young 20s men. I actually would recommend this primarily to people who are fans of shonen manga or anime. It is very much the story of this like underdog, like teen boy who is, just coming into adulthood. He's just becoming a man, and events happen. He kind of has this idea of what he wants his life to be, and everything he cares about is ripped away from him, and he sets out on this quest to become the best warrior in the land, and all of the odds are stacked against him, and he is willing to put in way more work and effort and blood and sweat and tears into becoming the best than anyone else. And basically he's just like, I'm gonna try harder than anyone, therefore I will become the best. And he's very powered by like rage and vengeance and like hatred for the people that like took away everything he cared about. And I think there's like a really interesting core there, like in terms of themes of this book. But I would say that especially in the middle, the training and fighting montages become very repetitive and formulaic, and it felt like it was kind of just, there'd be this person that Tao, who's the main character, wants to defeat, but this person is stronger than him, so he trains a bunch, and then he becomes stronger, and then he is able to defeat this person, and then there's this next person he wants to defeat who's even more powerful, and so he needs to train and do X, Y, and Z to become even stronger, and it just kind of does that over and over and over again. And I will say I liked the book overall, and the pacing is good. There's kind of bigger chapters that are more like sections or parts, and then within each chapter, because you might look at it and be like, oh, there's only 15 chapters or something, I can't remember how many, but it's not very many, but each of those chapters is broken up into much smaller sub-chapters that only take a few minutes for the most part to read each one, so it's paced really nicely, and that it's like a very easy to get through book and very digestible. But like I said, it did become very formulaic, and I was kind of getting sick of like sort of very similar training and fighting montages over and over and over again by the end. So I would still recommend this. It is an African-inspired fantasy story. The author is Black, and I really love the representation in this book. I think that is one of the strongest elements of this book, the cultural representation, and, you know, it very much is different from a lot of fantasy that's out there, and I understand that appeal because that's what drew me to this book. But I will say, I think not everyone is going to love it, and that's okay. Like, I liked it. Originally I gave this a 3.5 star, and I kind of was hovering between a 3.5 and a 4 because even with my problems with this book, I was still thinking so much about it, even, you know, weeks and months on, and it stuck with me in a way that a lot of books don't. So sometimes I finish a book and I think I absolutely love it, or I think I just thought it was okay, and then I'll find as I get farther away from a book I thought I really loved, I'm like, oh, actually that didn't leave as much of an impact on me as I thought it did. Or there'll be a book that I thought was just like good, like I liked it, but it wasn't my new favorite thing, but then it really sticks with me, and there's elements of it that I'm still thinking about. And this was definitely one of those books that I was thinking about a lot after the fact, and I have since read the sequel, but I did wait a few months between this book and reading the sequel, and I didn't even have to like read a summary online. I remembered everything that happened in this, which I read a lot. Let me tell you, that is very uncommon. Even if I only have maybe 6 or 8 weeks between a book, I pretty much always have to read a summary online before I jump back into it to remember like specific plot points. Like I'll remember the big picture stuff, but you know, side characters, or, you know, what the names of different places are, because in my head I'll just be like, that place with like those people, and like this different place with more water and different people, and like I can't remember what all of the terminology and stuff is called. Didn't have any issues with that with this book, so it was a really well constructed fantasy world. I would like to see him further explore certain elements of this world, like maybe that the people that are shown to be heroes might not be as heroic as we think they are, and maybe like they're kind of the bad guys in a different story, and maybe exploring some of that. There's like some stuff with like colonization where the people who are hyped as like the good guys might actually be like the colonizers and the bad guys, but like that isn't really explored, and I'm still waiting for it to be explored. I'm like, can we talk about this more? But I think it might be coming in book 3, so we'll see. But yeah, overall, I gave this like a 3.5 4 stars. I definitely think you should check it out, but I don't think it'll be everyone's cup of tea, like I said. But a good book, I think, for transitioning from YA to adult fantasy. It definitely has appeal for both markets. So that was everything I read this week, and this is the finished spread. I really love how the spread turned out, and, you know, this was a good time, a good reading week, a good week overall. This was the week I asked to go part-time at work, so I will try to talk about that more in my next video, and I will talk to you guys in my next one. Bye!